What's up, fight fans? It's your boy, the coronated king of mixed martial arts podcasting. Crowned this episode 100, His New Fistic Majesty, Centurion Jack Slack. And boy, has it been a big, busy week, news-wise, and we got tons to look forward to this weekend. We are entering a really good couple of weeks for fights. People get mad about me being pessimistic a lot. I can't help it. It's genetic. I'm English. But I'm very happy to admit that the coming few weeks of fights are tremendous. We've got an excellent Bellator coming up this weekend. We've got Rising 13 as well. We've got a Glory event, I believe, going on the same time. And obviously, going into next week, we've got Conor versus Khabib. So we'll be making lots of money if we be working in the MMA media, which we do. But other news and flappery is happening this week. It seems as though every time Conor McGregor is booked to fight, the UFC has this enormous push up to get the McGregor fight. The McGregor fight does amazingly, obviously, does over 1 million pay-per-view buys. The UFC is solvent again. It's like, oh, we're back in the black, excellent. And then you realise that they've just put everything on the back burner to get this Conor McGregor fight going. Right now, UFC 230 has no main event, and they are desperately scrambling to find one. That's Ariel Helwani's description, them desperately scrambling to find a main event. It's truly bizarre. These things, they announced the headliner months out, and they've just opted not to do one. And you'd think this has always been the real... And obviously, Diaz versus Poirier is on that card, but it's a strange main event with no title on the line. So there was... Well, we'll get into this in a second, but it's just always been the way. Like, the McGregor fight is everyone's eyes are on the TV. You could use that to sell future shit. You know, I've always said, like, you know, do a McGregor fight on International Fight Week, have the event before, the fight night on the Friday, have a load of the top lightweights fight. Or, you know... have the top lightweights fight on the main card of the McGregor fight, which is what they failed to do when Khabib fought at UFC 200. Instead, Khabib is on the undercard, you know, performing in front of no one. It's like the UFC, you know, you can't blame them for not striking gold with someone like McGregor more than once or twice. You know, McGregor and Rousey, fair enough. There's a lot of stuff there you can't control that made them into stars, but you could be using them to make other people look good, or at least be interesting, and then sell more fights. Truly bizarre. But then the UFC 230... See, if the Diaz-Poirier fight was happening on the same card, or a week after the UFC 229 main event, that would be very closely linked. That would be exciting. Whereas I don't know how many people will give a shit, you know, the next month. At any rate, that's what's been going on. The UFC are struggling to find it, well, were supposedly struggling to find a main event for the UFC 230. So then the obvious solution to making a main event, as we saw with Holly Holm, Jermaine Duradamy, or Max Holloway, Anthony Pettis, slam an extra belt on that shit. So both Dustin Poirier and Nate Diaz apparently got together and decided to announce that they would be fighting for the UFC 165, I think, pound title. And the main thing most people asked was like, what should we call it? Rather than, are these guys full of shit? But Dana White immediately came out and denied it, which is almost confirmation at this point. I think the sticking point would probably be what to call it. Do you call it super lightweight, junior welterweight? I would call it convenience weight. Just fill in that gap in the event schedule. So ears to the ground on that. That's one of those stories that's continuing as I'm recording this, so by the time you listen to this, if you listen to it either, you know, like tomorrow or the next day, it'll probably be all sorted out. We'll have a UFC 160-pound title. Nate Diaz will be in a title fight for no reason, once again. But how else are we supposed to get Nate Diaz in a title fight? But the real news this week, the real news that has everyone excited, is the return of Jon Jones. Again, I feel like I've already done an episode of the podcast called The Return of Jon Jones. This motherfucker can't keep his nose clean, often literally. But he's back. USADA have commuted. I don't know what the correct technical term is, but they have reduced his however long sentence he was supposed to have for his third testing offence. They've taken 30 months off it, so he had a 15-month retroactive suspension served retroactively or whatever. So he is eligible to fight in October. How convenient! You should know this is bullshit. Like, it's just laughable. From the moment that this started happening, when they had Jeff Nowitzki out there pretending that he was still involved with USADA, when he's actually now paid by the UFC to be like the guy who goes to USADA and goes, can we please not punish this guy? When he was on Rogan just being like, well, I don't understand why he would take that drug. It makes no sense. So the USADA's official opinion is that he didn't meaningly take this drug because that would make no sense. And all I can think of is, if you ever saw The Good Wife, in the first season, Matthew Perry turns up and he's absolutely brilliant in it. Matthew Perry, very good at playing villains. He was great in, he was good in Fallout, actually. But Matthew Perry plays this awful guy running for governor or some shit, and Big from Sex and the City turns up, or is in it as the woman's husband, the husband of the good wife, and he's mainly in it because he cuts a fine figure in a suit. He's a bear of a man, as Ben Shapiro would say. But he follows Matthew Perry into the bathroom after Matthew Perry's slagged off his wife or something like that, and he punches him in the nose at this black tie event. And as he's leaving, Matthew Perry's like, "Why'd you do that? You punched me in the nose." And Big, I can't remember what his name is, just goes, "That doesn't make any sense. Why would I do that?" And then walks off, which is exactly how I feel about this argument that why would he take the drugs if he got caught? You know, it makes no sense. When the one thing we know about John Jones is that his impulse control is shit and he likes cheating. The best part of this whole debacle is that the 30-month USADA themselves announced that the 30-month reduction in the suspension is for his help with future drug cheats and stuff, so giving them information, basically. The old Chael Sonnen deal, which is basically like, we're shit at this. Can you please tell us how you've been beating the tests? But the problem is that they basically said that John Jones is going to be snitching on various suppliers and stuff, and basically that means that John Jones' accepted defense is, I didn't deliberately take this drug, but if I did, here's a dude who sold me it. Okay? Just fucking awful. So transparent. And Daniel Cormier did a marvellous job of responding to this on the air on UFC state-run TV. I don't know what channel it is. Well, presume Fox. Yeah, Fox. But they asked him, and he basically said, you know, okay, cool, USADA, don't bother coming to my house at 6 a.m. or whenever, because he's done 70 drug tests with them. And to be fair, you know, even before any of this stuff happened, their first fight, people looked at the epitestosterone ratio of both of them and were like, that is a mess. These guys have some whack hormones. But, you know, he's never been caught for anything. In not only a career in MMA and under USADA in the UFC, but also in international wrestling. Now, that's not... The whole thing is that everyone's response to this, if they like Jones, is everybody's on drugs. And on the one hand, if you're one of those people like me who's very pessimistic and sees that there's an enormous drug problem in sports generally, and that it isn't always a problem, let's be honest. One of the worst kept secrets in the UFC is that immediately after USADA came in, injury rates and dropouts went through the roof. But if you really do believe everyone is on steroids, everyone else is managing to get away with it. John Jones is the guy who has failed multiple tests. Anderson Silva is the guy who's failed multiple tests. You know, you can have it, you can be like, everyone's roiding, but they can still pass the tests, and these guys aren't. So, it's just, there's a disconnect there. If the one thing you have to do is pass the tests, and these fuckers aren't doing it, fair enough, punish them. It doesn't mean you have to pretend that no one else is doing any drugs. It's just you have to accept that that's not a defense. And the best part is that Malky Kawa came out this week. If you saw the first hearing with USADA, where they basically outlined their "I don't know how the drugs got in my system" argument, it was absolutely desperate. Malky Kawa's big ring binder of tainted supplements, which is now legendary in MMA since I invented it, it was failing him, and they just decided to go on the... They didn't even present a defense, basically. But Malky Kawa has since been on Luke Thomas's show, which is the MMA hour now, I believe, but saying no, well, USADA did announce that John Jones is snitching, but I can guarantee that he isn't snitching. We have no idea what that's about. the whole thing is just like USADA gave him the best way out that they could, and Malki is still out here going, no, that's definitely not what happened. So if you thought that USADA had any integrity at all, no, it doesn't. Like, the whole thing, last week they came out and they were like, we would not be influenced by the UFC, and certainly they wouldn't bribe us to give Jon Jones a favourable hearing or whatever. And the whole thing is that the UFC is already paying them for a service. Like, this isn't a government body coming in. And that's the playoff. Like, yes, we laugh at Bellator and so on for not properly drug testing, because the mandatory drug testing under any commission is laughable. It's basically scheduled. But the only way to get real testing done is to pay for it yourself. And if you're paying for it, you could, that's already a sketchy arrangement. There's no way of making that look good unless the government or the commission is actually doing the random testing and you're not paying someone to do it for you. But on the other hand, we're all just so desperate to have Jon Jones back. I mean, this week's, last weekend's main event in UFC South Paulo was 2 middleweights going up to light heavyweight to replace light heavyweights because they're decent middleweights, and they're like, we could probably have a crack at this light heavyweight division. Anthony Smith has also gone up just because he wasn't outstanding at middleweight, and then he just crushed 2 of the old light heavyweights back to back on short notice. Light heavyweight is a wasteland. They do need Jon Jones there, but they also, like, the whole thing is that Jon Jones versus Bum of the Month isn't entertaining. Jon Jones versus top quality fighter is entertaining. And they just aren't around. I say that, but naturally, the day after Jon Jones news comes out, all the headlines, Alexander Gustafsson calls for Jon Jones fight. And you're just like, yeah, well, of course he does, because he's Alexander Gustafsson. Jon Jones has fought more recently than Alexander Gustafsson, which is staggering to think about. But yeah, there's that abortion of justice. Jon Jones, free to compete in MMA, despite 2 failed tests for actual fucking steroids or estrogen blockers or whatever. Yeah, that's tragic. Anyway, other news. In terms of the light heavyweight division, Thiago Silva's signed with KSW, which is, I suppose, interesting. If they put him in with Narkun, it'd be interesting, but I think they put him in with someone else. And he just can't really get past anyone nowadays, so yeah. Carlos Condit versus Michael Chiesa booked at UFC 232, which is nice because don't have to watch Carlos Condit get hit in the head too much. And of course, you're dealing with a former lightweight, a guy who's struggling with the weight cut now. God, if the UFC brought in that 165, maybe that. Oh God, how much would that throw people for a loop if that was the inaugural 165 title fight? Superstar Mike Chiesa versus Carlos Can't Win Condit. And then Mark Hunt versus Justin Willis has been announced for UFC Adelaide. That's a weird one, because I think it's supposed to be Mark Hunt's last fight. You're putting him in front of a hometown crowd. You know that he's a big draw, but Justin Willis is, he's got decently fast hands for a heavyweight. But also he's training at AKA, so he's going to be a decent wrestler. But then, it's a real search to find people that Hunt can beat. You could make the Struve rematch. That's almost a guaranteed win, but... yeah, that'll be interesting to see. And then some interesting not traffic, what's it called in TV terms? Oh, ratings. That's the one. My article ratings. No, ratings on the Bellator and UFC events. These are weird ones. Well, maybe not the Bellator one. Bellator 205 does 346,000 viewers, which is bad, but equally, I enjoyed the card, because it had AJ McKee and Rafael Lovato, who I very much enjoy. But, looking at a card, you knew it wasn't, like, going to do Chael versus Fedor numbers. But the one that threw me for a loop is the UFC Sao Paulo card doing 630,000 buys. Not buys, sorry. That's a past day, 600,000 buys. No, 607,000 views on Fox Sports 1, which is not bad because these have been dipping down to like 400,000. And this card wasn't like a strong card name-wise. I don't have any information on the times people tuned in, but maybe you got like an Ultimate Fighter finale effect where in the last fight of the night, which was Santos versus Anders, which was a real war, maybe some people called their friends or something. Well, that was the storyline they always put out. Like, people called their friends and then double as many people were viewing the fight by the end of it. So maybe that happened, but it's just maybe there was fuck all going on this weekend. I don't know. I don't follow the hand egg or the baseball, so I have no idea what's going on in the US at the moment, sport-wise. Maybe it's all those people boycotting the NFL. So not a bad return on that, actually. But we'll talk about that fight now. Into the recaps. Seamless transition. UFC South Paulo. Now, what stood out at me, because some of this I skipped and some of this just doesn't bear talking about really, but some of these were pretty decent. Decent. Talos Leites beating Hector Lombard by not knockout was a surprising one. Even though Talos Leites is not a big hitter, but Hector Lombard has been getting starched left, right, and centre since he came off the roids, really. But Jesus, I just clicked on his Tapology profile, and it takes you to a picture of him in Pride. And the size of this motherfucker. But yeah, since March of 2013, he has lost every fight he's been in. Knocked out by Neil Magny, Dan Henderson, Anthony Smith, and CB Dollaway. Oh no, CB Dollaway was late punches. Oh god, I remember that. That was weird. Yeah, so dude gets finished a lot, or has been finished a few times. He lost to Johnny Hendricks, which would tell you how done he is. But yeah, good on Talos Leites for getting that done. Shame he didn't get the knockout. Sergio Mariah versus Ben Saunders. That was fucking fun. Ben Saunders, cool guy, but he's basically known for being like one of the main exponents of the rubber guard in MMA. Not known as, Sergio Mariah is genuine world champion jiu-jitsu player. And Ben Saunders is not, but Ben Saunders has made excellent use of the rubber guard in MMA, mainly as like a holding position and a threatening position while he just hammers dudes' faces with elbows. What is it, Muddy Waters, they call it, the position that he caught that poor guy in and then just bloodied him up. But also, first omoplata finish in the UFC because the rubber guard all leads to the omoplata, which is mainly used as a sweep in most jiu-jitsu, because you're going to struggle to catch someone on their hands, on their belly, basically, and finish the omoplata. But Mariah really did a great job of passing the guard on Ben Saunders. Obviously, if you're playing rubber guard, one foot is in your hand, or one foot is like hooked by your arm, and the other foot is supposed to stay on the hip, because at the moment that the guy starts stepping over that and forcing it through, you're ending up in like a half guard with your own leg stretched up to you. So he was passing like that, which is really nice. He gets the mount near the end of the fight when he's looking for the arm triangle, and he tries to wrist lock a dude with hand wraps on. What a legend! I remember writing about this ages ago, being like, yeah, I'd love to see some wrist locks in MMA. Obviously, hand wraps do make it almost impossible, but maybe, and it is very, very hard. But yeah, picks up the arm triangle win. It was just I can't talk too much about that, but definitely go and watch that fight. One of the ones to watch if you missed this event. Tremendous grappling display from Mariah. Francisco Trinaldo versus Evan Dunham. A couple of old boys here. I think Trinaldo is going to be remembered as, well, certainly by me, as one of the best guys who never really got the attention that he deserved. He's going to be one of those ones, maybe not like Emmanuel Augustus, but someone similar, where it was a tough guy who only really ever lost to the best guys. Well, not the case with Emmanuel Augustus, but you know what I'm getting at. Only ever lost to the best guys, but never really got that push. And a lot of what Francisco Trinaldo does is quite basic. Like, he's mainly a southpaw with a big overhand left, really solid grappling and good takedown defense, who just sort of mixes it up and knows where to take fights. It's like if you put him in with like a phenom in any one area, he's wily enough and skilled enough overall that he can make it a really hard fight for them. But the knockout in this one was spectacular. Evan Dunham was really working the jab, painting him with it, southpaw jab all the time. Evan Dunham's jab, pretty good actually, and not always super committed, but sometimes he puts some pop on it and sometimes he doesn't, and that's a really good jab, when you're alternating between touching and thumping, and the other guy doesn't really get to see the difference, he only gets to feel it. But he just, like, in the finishing sequence, he threw 5 or 6 in quick succession, and then he steps in on one, and Francisco Trinaldo, they're both southpaw, he brings up the left knee and slams it into, like, the floating rib of Dunham, straight into the liver. Absolutely beautiful. I don't think I saw a replay of the other angles. I must have not been paying attention, but when it went in, it was gorgeous. And that's something that lots of top ties look for. Malapet taught an interesting one on one of his DVDs where you parry the jab outwards. So you like reach over the top of the jab with your rear hand and pull it outwards as you step inside with the knee, which is obviously very tricky to do. The easier way to do it is to parry it across yourself and stretch the other hand in their face and step in with the knee. It's anytime we talk about this all the time, landing body shots, it's when the elbows leave the sides. That's when you've got the best chance of landing the body shot, which means when the opponent's punching, that's the best time to hit their body. And if you watch Canelo versus Triple G the other day, Canelo was constantly firing those body shots when Golovkin was reaching for his head. But with the knee to the body, when you're dealing with straight punches, obviously you have a good chance of eating the straight punch up the middle, which I think Trinaldo did on this one, but still, amazing shot. Charles Oliveira broke Royce Gracie's record, or whatever it is, for most submissions. Lots of people being like, yeah, but you're not Royce Gracie, mate. You're not the best. And he's just like, but Charles Oliveira was doing it against world-class fighters who trained jiu-jitsu for years and years and years. Royce Gracie was doing it against guys who didn't know what they were doing. So Charles Oliveira's achievement is obviously much more impressive. And good on him for managing that and just continuing to be one of the most exciting submission artists in MMA history. Random Marcus fought to that draw. Renan Barão, God, I don't know if I touched on him last week. I don't know if I did, actually, because I think the news came out more... Yeah, it would have been after that the news came out that he missed weight by 5 pounds. And, like, Andre Ewell is not a famous fighter. He is a guy they brought in from the regional circuit. It would be one thing if Renan Barão was losing to the top guys in the division after he'd, like, been bumped down from champion. But... They're bringing in guys from the bus station, and he's struggling to get by them, or losing. He lost a split decision here. It's hard because like some of it could be USADA, no way of ruling that out. But I think a lot of it also is that this guy has been dying to make weight, and then he went up to 145 briefly to fight Jerry Stevens, and there was flashes of good stuff in there from him. But now he's back at 135, and I just like his weight cut is so grueling, and he's done it so many times now because he's got like how many fights? 40 fights, and he shouldn't be going for that weight anymore, to be honest. But I was talking to someone earlier this week about like TJ exposing him, and TJ, there's when people say exposed in fighting, there's different meanings. Some people are like, oh, exposed him is not very good, but what TJ did was expose very obvious flaws in him. Not going to joke myself off too much here, but if you want to watch the Joe Rogan with TJ just after he won the title, and he shouts out my articles. Good stuff, because the Killing the King article, basically, I just said Renan Barão really loads up on these counter punches. If you use lots of feints, you're going to be able to confuse him, getting swinging at air and then not swinging as readily, and then you'll be able to sneak punches in, which is exactly what Dillashaw did, and many other things in the course of that bout. But it's not like guys have seen that and are now doing that to Renan Barão. Renan Barão is just losing to worse fighters. So fuck knows what's going on with that lad. I hope he gets it together, because he can be pretty fun. He was a monster, as they used to say back in the day. No, he was a good finisher and a fun fighter. Sort of like budget Aldo. Aldo without as many of the skills. Aldo continued improving, and Renan Barão really only had the jab and the low kick and some grappling. And his takedowns were the worst. Like, if you watch Renan Barão attempt a takedown, it's a lean forward at the waist lunge at the opponent, and sometimes like he gets guys by merit of it being unexpected because he's a striker, or like billed as a striker. But if you watch him against Jeremy Stevens, or I think he does it to Dillashaw a couple of times, they're just like, that's never going to work on me, mate. What you doing? Antonio Hajiro Nogueira came back, on the subject of how bad the light heavyweight division is. Antonio Hajiro Nogueira bum rushed Sam Alvey and stopped him. It was a pretty weird stoppage, but still, losing to Antonio Hajiro Nogueira, God. Still, it's a lot more respectable to get knocked out by Antonio Hajiro Nogueira, who actually has hands, than it is to get knocked out by Roddy Nog. People always posting that Brendan Schaub clip of him getting knocked out by Rodrigo Nogueira, and you're just like, oh well, that's the esteemed list of knockout victims at the hands of Rodrigo Nogueira. Him and Japanese middleweight Sanai Kikuta. I think he fought a welterweight before, actually. But yeah, pretty tragic that's the state of things in the light heavyweight division. That Roger Nog takes the 2 years off or whatever it was, and then comes back and slots right in the top 10 or whatever it is. Oh, book him versus Shogun, number 3. Do it. Actually, I think they just announced that Shogun's been booked to fight. Who was that? Fuck. Oh, Tyson Pedro. Oh, God, he's getting smoked in that. Most likely. Alex Oliveira versus Carlo Pedersoli. Don't know if I'm saying that right. I don't know if it'll matter, to be honest. But yeah, Carlo comes out, throws a side kick. Alex Oliveira parries it the wrong side, but keeps a hold of it, and then comes back with the right hand and just wangs him right on the temple. Really good counter shot. Knocks him down, gets the finish. As we always say, there are levels to this shit. Actually, I hate saying that, but clearly there are. Between him and then Neil Magny and Diego Sanchez just smoking Craig White. And then in the main event, Thiago Santos versus Eric Anders. Love both these lads. Absolute war. Anders, I feel like his striking has got worse. I don't know. Maybe he's just not been in with top quality opposition. You know, Santos is the best fighter he's fought, probably, or best ranked. But yeah, I used to, because he does a lot of walking guys to the fence, and then when they duck in on his hips, he does a really good job of like punishing them. He also does a great job of tying them up along the fence, and then that knee that he snuck into Santos's face as Santos was trying to fight off his hands, he does that all the time. I remember writing about him before the Machida fight, and like almost everyone he fights is surprised by that, you know, standing knee to the face from the clinch. And really good at getting the quarter Nelson when guys are fighting on the single, and he'll try and knee him in the head then. I think he caught Santos with a good knee coming off the ground. He caught him with a good knee to the body along the fence. Was that the end of the round? Can't remember. But the pace proved a lot for him, and Santos' power, which is obviously legit, proved too much for him too. Always good to see Santos pick up a victory. I said on Twitter, if he got a new tattoo for every knockout win he got, he'd eventually find a good tattoo, because he has some atrocious. That Warhammer is barely better than Brock Lesnar's dick on his chest. But I like Santos, and he looked absolutely huge, because I thought Anders was a fairly big middleweight, but the fact that Santos looked huge carrying 205 or at 205, yeah, very surprising. I thought, obviously, both more Anders than Santos. Santos was training for this fight longer, but Anders looked very soft around the midsection for this one. Whereas Santos, it looked like his extra weight was just water. You know, he was there having trained to be fighting at 205, whereas Anders looked a bit more like he'd, not begun any kind of training for a serious fight, and was just, yeah, I'll take the fight. It's 20 pounds up from what I normally am, or I don't have to do the weight cut or whatever. But really good, really entertaining fight. Rough fight for Anders. Anders is tough as hell, but you don't want to see fighters take too many fights like that, because that'll shorten your career. And he had a real hard one with God, I can't even remember who it was, Voldemort, until he legally soccer kicked him. Love that. Loved legal soccer kick. And actually, I meant to write about it, but I never did. You know, I keep saying I'm going to write that article about the technical stand-up, but you can do a two-handed technical stand-up, which is something mainly I do when I'm tired, but you know, where you put both hands to the same side and do a technical stand-up like that. I think maybe it would be in the interest of fighters to use that in MMA now, because I think two hands on the mat is no knee, and one hand on the mat is knee. Well, I can't remember. The new rules have changed. I should know this so that I can shit on Gegard Mousasi's one important win. Way! You know, we'll be talking about Mousasi later. Don't worry. We'll get the snark in there. Actually, as we finished on the main event there, and it was decent. Decent. Was it 600,000 viewers? Decent, apparently. Let's talk about the fights going on this weekend. So I think we'll start with Rising, because I think obviously everyone's a little bit more... most people are more excited about Bellator, I think. But, you know, I'm more excited about Rising. But I think Bellator has the better main fights. Well, you know, let's find out. So Rising 13, you got Ayaka Hamasaka... Oh, hang on. This card is in a weird order. It's because I'm on Tapology. I need to go find the formal layout. Oh, here we go. Fight order confirmed. Okay, cool. So, Yusaku Nakamura versus Manel Kape. Hey, Manel Kape's back. He is a good heel. He's like Crazy Horse with talent. So, he will always go down well with people. Then you got Tiger versus Kento Haraguchi. I don't know how good Haraguchi is, honestly. Tiger's pretty good. I've seen him fight before. Ayaka Hamasaki versus Mina Kurobe. No idea. Kaya Sakura versus Top Noi Tiger Muay Thai, which is a great name. Fair enough. I do like that Rising has the optional elbows, because a lot of these have brackets that say elbows allowed. Osunarashi versus Bob Sapp. So you got Asumo versus Bob Sapp. Who the fuck cares? Chanel versus Take. This is a weirdly designed poster. Let's talk about the ones we actually care about. Darren Cruikshank versus Diego Brandao. Now, that's good. Both those guys are good enough to still be in the UFC. But Diego Brandao is a head case, and Darren Cruikshank, I don't know. He lost a couple of fights, and they were just like, cut him. He came back after like a year off after that Ahmed Aliyev fight where he retired, basically when he was gassing out, and then was like, I was headbutted and threw a bitch fit and got out of the ring. But then he came back and fought Kitaoka, who is kind of getting old now, but he beat him by a ground and pound in round 1, which is impressive. Cruikshank, meanwhile, actually on a streak of 3 wins, which is interesting because he's been fighting constantly for Rizin. He's fought on most of their events since losing to Paul Felder in a close fight where he lost by rear naked choke, but he kicked Paul Felder in the face a ton. He has fought Shinzi Sakaki on the first Rizin event, Andy Sauer, who he took down and choked because obviously kickboxer versus MMA fight. No matter how much you want to see this is what we're going to talk about with the Kyoji thing, but if you don't make an actual kickboxing match, it's like Sakuraba versus Aoki. If you don't make it a grappling match, Aoki's going to punch him in the face, no matter how much you want there to be a gentleman's agreement that they're going to meet in grappling. But yeah, so he beat Andy Sauer. Then Satoru Kitaoka actually guillotined him in a really good fight. Isugi actually check-hooked him and knocked him flat on his face, which was a rough knockout. But then since then, he's built up 3 wins. Alexander Trevino, Koshi Matsumoto, and Tom Santos, all by knockout. The Matsumoto one was the one where he head-kicked him and flipped him off immediately afterwards. Santos he finished with elbows. Fair enough. That's fairly unique in Rizin. Even though elbows are allowed in Rizin, you don't see them, well, in a lot of Rizin's fights, you haven't been seeing them that much. This one's going to be interesting because, Brandao has made it down to featherweight before, so he's probably the smaller guy. But he has, power in his hands, but he tends to, run for punches and chase people and then tire himself out. I think, the longer Cruikshank waits, I think, actually, I'd be really interested to see if the D-side, the defensive sidekick, could be brought to lever against Brandao. But then, of course, Brandao could grab that and try and get a takedown. If Brandao was feeling clever, he'd try and get on top of Cruikshank as quickly as possible. Because Cruikshank, I think his last 3 losses in the UFC, all rear naked choke. Just guys getting into good position on him and finishing him. Before that, Adriano Martinez arm locked him, and Bobby Green submitted him back in the day. Interesting, but that's ages ago. That's King of the Cage. But, there's always that sort of susceptibility there. He might give his back and give you a rear naked choke. But Diego Brandao is typically not a very smart fighter. And very emotional, so I could see if Cruikshank went to the sidekick and running, he'd probably be able to frustrate Brandao and run him on to either a left straight or a back fist or something like that. That'd be interesting because you never know how either of those guys are going to fight. Both of them are a little bit wild. Andy Nguyen versus Miyu Yamamoto. Let's not, There'll be something nice for Kid, which I hope. Well, I hope there's something nice for Kid. They said that they were going to. I've had a couple of chats with Rizin staff on Reddit this week. Well, one of them was them defending TK versus Cro Cop, because people want to have it where Cro Cop is 44 and TK is 48, so that fight's completely reasonable. But people also want to remind you that Cro Cop just beat King Mo in the most serious match of his career very recently, whereas TK's done nothing. So you can't have it both ways. Either Cro Cop's doing well and back, which is what he is. He beat King Mo, who's a decent heavyweight and a decent light heavyweight. Or you can have that he's an old man and there's just no difference between him and TK. You can't have both. And the Rizin guy was trying to tell me that they planned or they expected a Fedor versus Fujita moment. And I was like, you expected that? Really? And then going on about respecting TK's Budo spirit. And I was like, well, it's only Budo spirit if you're an old Japanese man. It's not, we can't just keep going on warrior spirit where we're making deliberate mismatches to make guys look good. But they did say that I asked them if they were going to do anything nice for Kid, and they said they might do something. I mean, I wrote a big eulogy for Kid. It was a weird one for me because last week I was a little bit down. I actually got a couple of phone calls of people worrying me about me because I sounded so down on that. But no, I just did it off the cuff. I thought, why not just give people a real reaction to the death of someone. I mean, I vaguely knew him, but I knew him. And I realised that I didn't actually say anything about his career in that time. So in the eulogy I wrote, I actually managed to put together some better thoughts, and I was totally over it. And then I saw those photos of him with BJ Penn, because he'd been hiding this cancer for 2 years, but he had seen BJ Penn in that time, and BJ put up these photos, and he's unrecognisable, and it really got me. But anyway, so they said they'd be doing something nice for Kid, and with Kyoji and Miyu Yamamoto in the main and co-main position on this card, I would expect that you can expect. They'll probably wear something nice from like Crazy B, because obviously Kid was well into art, and the design of his trunks was always like the best. It was him and Genki competing. Genki had like Che Guevara on shiny background for his shorts once. And then in the main event, you got Tenshin Nasukawa versus Kyoji Horiguchi. I was about to say great fight, but I don't know. It's interesting. Like, it's better than watching Tenshin Nasukawa smash scrubs, like he has been doing in Rising until now. And they got Tiger in a kickboxing match. I think he's supposed to be fighting Tiger in, is it No Kick No Life or Knockout or whatever they call it, at the end of the year. The problem has never been with Tenshin not fighting good guys. The problem has always been, like, I don't like watching people get smashed. Or rather, I don't like people being set up to get smashed. If you get smashed, it should be because, wow, that guy smashed that dude. Who'd have seen that coming? Like, if two good, well-matched up fighters fight, and one guy just blows the other out of the water, I'm like, wow, that's impressive. But if you just match a dude there, and everyone knows they're going to get smashed, I feel that's just exploitative and shitty. Obviously, anytime you talk about Tenshin, you are skirting the line. I say I don't like Tenshin fighting scrubs in Rising, and like the weebs get on their high horse and get upset, and then I write an article about Tenshin saying, hey, look at all this cool stuff he does, and all the like Thai elitists go, well, he only fought 4 Thais, and one of them was old, and one of them was in the, not in his natural weight class, and you're just like, calm the fuck down. We can all accept he's a good fighter. Well, if you can't accept he's a good fighter, you're a fucking moron. And if you can't accept that he's fought some exploitative scrub matches, you're also a moron. Like, that's the truth of it. But he is very, very good. He's a top 10 ranked bantamweight kickboxer in the world. Be very interesting to see. I'm always going to talk about that Takeri fight because I would love that matchup of studs. You've got ultra aggressive versus massive hitting counter striker. But in this fight, you got super explosive counter striker versus super explosive longer distance karate MMA counter striker. And I don't know. Like, I don't know if Kyoji. I think Kyoji's style is probably pretty bad for this fight. If you've seen the sort of the 2 fights I point to as giving Tenshin trouble, it's Soakim, which is the one that most people don't really talk about because it wasn't a particularly exciting fight, and Rodtang, which everyone remembers because you either thought that he totally dominated or was robbed. It's one of those fights where it's actually a really close decision, but people have to have a really strong opinion one way or the other. But the interesting thing was, like, put Tenshin on the ropes, make him move and run off the ropes to try and make space. Because the thing is, like, Tenshin's very good with that drawing in open side counter, and it's that slight angle he takes while he retreats and stretching out the opponent, and it's one technique, but there's a lot of different subtleties to it, and you can catch it from all sorts of slight angles, more severe angles, and so on. Not unlike Conor McGregor, Stephen Thompson, guys like that. And think of any good southpaw counterpuncher who uses that open side angle. But that is a technique that requires some space because there's a back step in it, or like an angle off to the retreat in it. And if you put him on the ropes, that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. So what he will do is he'll try and reset and get off the ropes. Now, the thing is, like, if you just bum rush him on the ropes, there's nothing to stop him cracking you in the face on the way in, and he still hits really, really hard. I mean, he was trying to land right check hooks with the right hand on guys coming in, and he landed a good few on Suakim. But he will try and get off the ropes, almost guaranteed. And when he does that, a lot of the time he'll sprint out into space. And if you watch the 4th and 5th round of both the Sakim and... I just keep saying that like it's Joaquin Phoenix. I don't know what the correct pronunciation is. But if you watch the 4th and 5th round of the Sakim and the Rodtang fights, he's very, very tired from all the running off the ropes. Sakim didn't push it very well, but Rodtang was really going for it. But Rodtang was like taking his punches, which is I think that's a terrible game plan for anyone to have, honestly. I would not put walk through Tenshin's punches high in the list of things to do. But... Sakim was very much, he was letting Tenshin have too much time on the ropes without doing anything. He wasn't really cooking him. He was just sort of like leaving him there. And then he'd like teep him onto the ropes gently and then maybe land a couple of punches or throw a couple of punches. Whereas Rodtang was constantly in his face and making stuff happen. Thing is, Kyoji Horiguchi's style ain't about that. He ain't about that pressure life. He's about that karate life, which is often about being elusive. He's not, in terms of... if you look at the two of them, they're very different strikers. But in terms of overall plan, both of them like a lot of distance, a lot of room to move around in. I don't think Kyoji's the kind of guy to put the pressure on him, but maybe he could. Anytime I think of this, like, I described this as Maymac for people who thought they were too good for that, and I'm grouping myself in with that too, because I was like, the whole lead up to Maymac, I was like, oh, for fuck's sake, and then I'm actually super amped about this fight. And to put it this way, I don't think Kyoji will win. I don't think that there is a huge difference between MMA and kickboxing. It's smaller than boxing and MMA, but it is still substantial, and I'm more treating this as like a learning. Well, I'm super invested in Horiguchi's career because I've known him since he was like a babby. He makes an appearance in that eulogy, by the way. But I'm more interested in seeing how he can use this as a learning experience, because a lot of the time in Rising, I felt like, yeah, he's looking great and he's working with ATT, so he's getting better. And the holes in his grappling were what were letting him down in the UFC. Give up his back in every fight by accident. But equally, the more time he spends out of the cage and fighting lower opposition, I feel like he's not developing as well as he could if he were in like the UFC Shark Tank of a division. Mind you, a lot of the time the UFC is very reluctant to match top flyweights against each other. So I think this is a really good learning opportunity. It's not like Maymac where McGregor took the whole year off and was boxing the whole time. This has been signed and turned around pretty quickly. But I still think it's a super learning experience. And of course, whenever we think about MMA versus kickboxing, there is always going to be the spectre of Overeem versus Harry, and probably more akin to this fight, Mousasi versus Kotaro. And I can already feel people having a bitch fit for me comparing Tenshin to Kotaro. But both of those guys like a lot of space, do a lot of work moving backwards. Kotaro is a bit more limited. He didn't have an awful lot of weapons. It really was just walk people onto the left hand. Or the right hand. I can't remember which way around he was even, but Mousasi really got him by using lots of very conservative 1-2s, the odd low kick, lots of push kicks and things. And push kicks are a great sort of thing to use against like good counter punches. Tenshin's a lot better at catching kicks and trying to come back in off them, but a good straight kick is a nice way to push someone out of range so that they can't come back at you as easily, and you've got room to react even if they do catch the leg. I'll be writing something about this either tonight or tomorrow, but I think it's a tough one to see Kyoji winning with his usual style, but I think like he's probably going to put himself in more danger if he tries to fight the style of fight that has worked against Tenshin. And I know I'm treating Tenshin like, I'm doing this very much framed from Kyoji's perspective, because Tenshin should win this one. He's the known commodity in kickboxing, and Kyoji's the guy who we've not seen in any kickboxing. And I think all the pressure is on Kyoji. Well, actually, all the pressure is probably on Tenshin, because, Kyoji can go out and get sparked, and it's still going to be what people expected. People are expecting him to lose, but if he wins, that's disastrous. Well, not disastrous for Tenshin, but that's a huge upset. Anyway, I'm so stoked about that fight. I'm sorry I couldn't keep my thoughts together very well there, but I'll be writing something about that this evening, so make sure to check out Vice Sports or the Fight Primer and check where I write that. And let's have a look at this Bellator card, which is actually pretty good. He says, scrolling through about 3 pages to get to the bottom of it on Tapology. Okay, right. Arbitrarily cutting off half of these fights. Fuck them. Kerry Melendez, yay, versus Dakota Zimmerman. Aaron Pico, way, versus Leandro Higo. That's a good fight. Higo's an experienced guy. Higo only just lost to Darian Caldwell in that great fight, was it? Bellator 195, where he was... took him down by the underhook and like tried to smash past him, and then Higo started coming up and he guillotined him. It was absolutely brilliant. Or was it a knee tap? I think it was a knee tap he took him down with. But yeah, I do like what they're doing with Aaron Pico. Obviously it was a jump in at the deep end of the first fight to take on a guy with like 10 fights, and that sort of backfired. But equally, they've now got him back on track, and they're just like, yeah, let's go for it. It's very different to... the MVP thing. And to be fair, a lot of their stuff is very different to the MVP thing. That's part of what makes it so noticeable. When you got like guys like Rafael Lovato, that I watched him last weekend fight guys with winning records and 10-1 or 15-4 or whatever, and he's fighting decent guys within even the Bellator division is so bad, he's fighting the better guys in it. It's really noticeable when MVP doesn't fight anyone for like 6 years. So good on them for putting Pico in with such a tough opponent. I think Higo's coming up from bantamweight here, isn't he? So maybe he'll have a size disadvantage, but that'll be interesting to see. Pico's boxing sharp. And body shots, it is the year of the body shot apparently, but I love a body shot. Douglas Lima versus Andrei Koreshkov. I have written the article, I've sent it in, I don't know if it's gone up yet. Probably has by the time you listen to this. Go and read it, because I've waxed lyrical about this fight. I love it. What I like about Lima is that he brings out a smart side of Koreshkov. Koreshkov is a Shlemenko student, so he does a lot of spinning for no reason, does a lot of like retarded stuff. But against Lima, Koreshkov fights smart. And the one time he didn't, he got sparked. He got knocked unconscious by a check hook, which he'd been dealing with perfectly for almost 7 rounds at that point. So Koreshkov, complete clash of styles. High stance, lots of low kicking Lima. Longer stance, more boxing and spinny kicking from Andrei Koreshkov. And Koreshkov really used takedowns well in both fights, actually. Lima, the thing about him is that he plays well on his back with double overhooks and butterflies, which is very hard to do. Joe Lozon's the other one I can think of who really does it regularly. But he's sort of like, in the first fight, he was like go big or go home with it. So he'd sweep Koreshkov, and then if he didn't complete the sweep, he'd just flop to his back again and try again, rather than like scramble up desperately. And then if he did complete the sweep, he'd start working on the front headlock, and Koreshkov would keep a hold of the leg and then drive through and finally finish the takedown again. Koreshkov showed real tenacity on the leg in that fight. He's going for these high crotches, which is interesting because, like the high crotch is always a bit more dangerous than the head inside single. Some people call it head outside single. But the high crotch is like, a lot of wrestling coaches believe that the high crotch should be used to set up a double leg. You switch to the double. It's for something more important. Whereas in MMA, the two guys who I can think of who are really good at the high crotch are Daniel Cormier, obviously, the daddest man on the planet, and Jake Shields. And they both used it as like a head outside single. It was its own thing. They were just cracking guys down to the mat or lifting the leg up and sweeping them. But yeah, in the course of that first fight, every time Koreshkov hit the high crotch, he'd crack Lima down to the mat, and Lima would almost get on his back by butt dragging up. So he was really playing with fire, but he did it very successfully. But then in the rematch, and he was also keeping Lima off balance, because what Lima does is he low kicks and he check hooks. And if you can deal with those two things, you're going to beat him on the feet. But if you don't, you're going to get check hooked, or you're going to get hobbled and then check hooked. But by showing lots of feint jabs and probing with the jab, he could make Lima swing at air. And the other thing he was doing was like he'd throw at Lima, and then Lima would come back at him, and then he'd catch the leg, snatch it up for a snatch single or a high crotch, and put him on his back immediately. And that happened like 5 or 6 times through the fight, and immediately in the second fight too. But in the second fight, you notice that Lima gets taken down immediately, gets his his overhooks and his butterflies, and goes for the sweep. But instead of like when he meets resistance, just going, "Oh, okay, cool, I'll try again," he immediately scrambles up and like drags Koreshkov into an over-under clinch, pushes him into the fence, and stops him from following up with another takedown attempt, which was a real nice look. That fight, the second fight, was lost basically because Koreshkov, when Lima kept backing onto the fence, rather than pick, duck on the hips and takedown, which is what he normally does, Koreshkov just randomly decided, okay, I'm going to throw both hands from behind me. It was the weirdest thing. Like, he'd been doing so well, even within that fight, just pick or hit the body, duck on the hips, and then suddenly he just starts throwing uppercuts from behind him for no reason and gets sparked. So very interested to see how that third fight goes. I think Koreshkov's got the tools to beat him, to be honest. But Lima, I would love to see Lima add some more looks, because it's stiff jab, like leaping across the ring, check hook, low kick, and that's all he does. And it was really obvious against Rory MacDonald that he just doesn't push a pace enough, doesn't push his advantages enough. Quinton Jackson versus Wanderlei Silva, I'm not going to talk about that. How dare you? Jesus Christ, is that a heavyweight? It's saying here that it's at 265. That would be fucking tragic. Heavyweight Wanderlei Silva. The third fight, they were both washed up for. For a long time, Quinton Jackson, his only knockout was Wanderlei Silva in 2008, and there was nothing after that until he came to Bellator and beat some guy you never heard of. And then Gegard Mousasi versus Rory MacDonald. Don't know if I'm going to write about this. Maybe I will. But yeah, it's interesting because, like, if you think about it, if this happened in the UFC, you'd be like, huh, that's a weird fight. Why is top middleweight Gegard Mousasi wasting his time fighting top welterweight Rory MacDonald? But it became really clear that they didn't have anyone for Mousasi to fight. So Rory MacDonald is like working double duty here. He's being the most exciting, the most exciting part of their most exciting division, welterweight, while also trying to prop up Gegard Mousasi's division by taking this fight that he should lose. Now, I'm quite aware that the last 2 champion versus champion fights or crossweight champion versus champion fights we've had in MMA, the lighter guys actually won. But it's a rough one for Rory because like he's a guy whose nose is basically gravel in a bag of skin now, and Gegard Mousasi is a guy with a really good jab. Mousasi's an interesting one because he's seen as like an all-rounder, but I don't think his game always links as well together as it should. He's got very good jab, decent right hand, low kicks decently, but very good jab is the main thing that he has on the feet. And then he's a good grappler too, but the two things don't really link very well. If you compare, like, if I said very good jab and very good grappling, you'd think like George St. Pierre or someone like that. But George St. Pierre's whole thing was like those two things working together. Whereas Mousasi, it's not always the case, I don't think. Mousasi's sort of the guy who, if you're a good striker, he'll take you down, and if you're a good grappler, he'll box you up. But I feel like he is also, like, his two most notable losses are Machida and Souza, or Jacare rather. An alligator is what he identifies as. But those two fights were him getting beaten by specialists in their area. It was a case of him not being able to mix the fight into the area where he should have more of a chance. He got taken down and mauled by Jacare, which is no shame, obviously, but he's seen as this all-rounder, but he couldn't bring the fight into the area that he needed there. And against Machida, he was slapped around on the feet, but he couldn't bring the fight into the area that he, would have had more of an even footing on the ground or in the clinch. He seems very much like a guy who is good at everything, but like plays it by ear. It's sort of Fedor-esque. Well, Fedor was his mentor for a while, but like, people always said about Fedor, firstly, he did have showings of good fight IQ, but it was also like, part of the aura was he's good at everything. You bring what you've got, he'll match it with his, and he'll probably win. I don't know if that works against like the level of competition that are at the top end of the middleweight division right now. But then Rory MacDonald is like not a terrific striker, good kicker, but good jabber actually. I'll be interested to see how he can take away Mousasi's jab rather, and what he can do with his takedown attempts, because he's a big welterweight. So maybe he'll have a better chance of actually outmuscling Mousasi. The most painful thing about this is that if Gegard Mousasi beats this welterweight, he will suddenly be like the alternate best middleweight in the world. Like he's come out recently and been like, yeah, Robert Whittaker, anyone with good stand-up could beat him. And you're like, you couldn't even earn the shot at him, mate. What's going on? Oh, God. Do you know what? People confuse this. I like Mousasi. I like Valentina. I like Anderson Silva. It's the fan bases that are agony on my brain, but maybe I should just ignore them, because like the fan base is often the worst part of any sport. Anyway, let's do some questions for this 100 episode special. I don't know what's special about it, but let's do some questions. Hey Jack, I was listening to Big John and Goldie praise Kavanagh and SBG instead of talk about the fights they're paid to discuss, and I remembered this question. I'm among those who thinks that Kavanagh is probably not the best coach, and I often wonder, A, how much better could McGregor be if he were at a different camp, and most importantly, B, which contemporary fighter or fighters do you believe would benefit from a camp change, and C, which camps are currently getting more out of their fighters? Oh, that's an interesting one. Thanks, from Robert. The camp change is a classic one. I was going to say Overeem, and then literally before starting this podcast, I noticed that Overeem's moved to the same team as what's the wrestler who just beat him? Curtis Blades, yeah, the Elevation Fight Team or something like that. Continuing the like speculation that Jackson Wink is just falling apart. But the Conor McGregor one, and I wrote about this in the book. Half the theme of the book is like, when should you leave a camp? About making the most of your surroundings, and it's very easy for us, particularly me in the media, to be like, yeah, move across the country, mate, and sort your life out. Move across the country to learn to check a kick or whatever. Or Edson Barbosa, go to a camp that will teach you to circle. But that's asking someone to pick up their entire life, which is at the start. But also, a lot of people work better just being at home with people that they like. I think there is quality of coaching can be offset by, well, firstly, quality of training partners, but also offset by comfort. Some people desperately need to be taken out of their comfort zone. Some people perform much better when they are at home among the people that they care about. And I think the theme of Conor McGregor's life generally has been that, Well, firstly, he's always on about loyalty, but secondly, he really likes Ireland. He really likes where he lives, and the people that he's around. They brought in Dylan Dennis and stuff like that, but that was a choice later on when he was rich. But he's always liked guys like Paddy Houlihan and Carl Pendred. And, he basically got them fights in the UFC. Carl Pendred, no one was dying to see him, but by knowing Conor McGregor and being a friend of Conor McGregor, he got much more out of his UFC tenure than he probably would have were he not closely related to him. And Artem, Artem's not a very good fighter, but he continues to get fights in the UFC. I think having that, having people that you care about is interesting. It's especially interesting because there's, especially in the BJJ community, there's this big thing about creontes or people who abandon their academy and their coach. And one of the best American guys in the game today, Mikey Minucci, what's his name? Mushimi? No. Fuck, I can't remember his name, but Mikey, whoever, he has changed camp more than anyone, but nobody really talks about it. It's really interesting. Meanwhile, Eddie Cummins left the Danaher Death Squad, and now everyone's on his ass about that. It was super weird. The whole snake in the grass thing about TJ Dillashaw leaving Team Alpha Male. I think really, unless you are the coach and you're losing a cut of your pay, there's not really as much to it as people think. Most of the time, people are just desperate to get better, and especially in other occasions, fighters need a reason that they lost, which is why it's all, my nutrition wasn't on track, my weight cut was bad, and I'm just not getting the coaching I need right now, is probably the easiest way out of that. Which contemporary fighter could use a camp change? Edson Barbosa could use going to a boxing coach, and a really good boxing coach, and just working ringcraft with really good boxers. Which camps are currently getting more out of their fighters than average? Oh, that's an interesting one. I don't know how I'd measure that. I suppose the smaller camps that are making a big impact. I'd say maybe Rufus Sport. Because in terms of Duke Rufus is a striking coach, and he's really seen as that, and more his camp. His camp is full of quality wrestlers now. We only knew him originally for training Anthony Pettis and Sergio Pettis, and then suddenly he's got Tyron Woodley and Ben Askren on the team, and they're winning fights largely with their wrestling. Stuff that they picked up long before they got to him. But equally, having a team with two decent world champions on and so few other really well-known prospects would suggest that they're doing very well for themselves, or outperforming themselves, or exceeding expectations, or whatever. Anyway, cheers, Robert. Hi, Jack. I've just finished watching Sergio Mariah versus Ben Saunders, and at the end of the first round, Jimmy Smith points out that Mariah attempts a wrist lock on Saunders briefly as he is moving between positions and submission attempts. My understanding is the knock on wrist locks in MMA has always been that the taped hands make it very hard, if not impossible, to finish. However, I was thinking of Rory MacDonald, who has stopped wrapping his hands for fights and publicly talked about it. Would it be possible for fighters to target the submission on him, especially since he has probably not spent a lot of time training or thinking about defending them? Cheers from New Zealand, Sam. P.S. Recently subscribed to the Patreon episodes and have loved the Pride episodes. I've been inspired to go back and watch some of those Grand Prix. They are bloody good. Yeah, Sam, what was it? Yeah, the wrist lock. I exploded online when I saw this. I was like, oh my God, absolute boy. I think, yeah, if you announce that you're not wearing hand wraps, I think you're fair game to get wrist locked. If you watch Pancrase, obviously a lot of stuff is different in Pancrase. People are diving on toe holds from the mountain stuff. But, well, I say different, we're getting back that way now in the high-level grappling. But one of the things that was really noticeable is a lot of guys went for wrist locks from the mount, because guys had crossed their hands in front of their neck or have their hands up home aloneing or T-Rexing or whatever you want to call it. And guys would try and roll the wrist down and pull it into themselves, gooseneck style, and then switch to a figure four grip and go for the arm bar, sorry. But wrist locks, continue to surprise people. Like Marcelo Garcia submitted Pavlo Popovic while looking for a north-south choke. The hand was just there and he smashed it down and got the submission. If you put it on quick, and I think that's the problem with the hand wraps, you might be able to forcibly bend someone's wrist, because the wraps are going to move around if they get sweaty and stuff, and they're there to hold your hand in rigid in position, but they do move during a hurly-burly, Shakespearean term for a fight there. Don't know why I said that, but if you don't have the hand wraps on, you've got a much better chance of just slamming that lock on quickly, which is how most high-level wrist locks happen. You've just got to get it as quick as possible, because if you get it to the position, it's kind of like an armbar. Once you've got the grip broken and you've got it stretched out, you've got a much better chance of finishing it. If you get the wrist into position and slam it on as hard as possible quickly, you've got a much better chance of getting the tap than if you're slowly working towards it. I mean, are exceptions like Claudio Calasanz. He'll do wrist locks from the closed guard and he'll just crank them on and keep him on until he finally gets the tap or moves to an armbar. But if you watch a lot of the best ones, like a couple of Keenan Cornelius ones, he got Jacare won one back in the day. This is grappling, not MMA, obviously. The Marcelo Garcia one I mentioned. Most of it is people just slamming them on quickly. Fucking Wagner Rocha won the other day by Mercy wrist lock, which is where the guy interlaced fingers with him on the feet. And he just turned the hand so that his palm was facing upwards and straightened the guy's arm out. And with those upward facing like wrist extensions, the extending of the wrist makes you straighten your arm to try and relieve the pressure. And once that arm's locked in position, you're not going to be able. It's like classical Japanese jiu-jitsu stuff. You're not going to be able to rebend your wrist or your elbow. That's when you see guys like Wally J like marching people around the room with their arm extended and curling their fingers back towards the back of their wrist. But yeah, it worked. Wagner Rocha did it the other day. But that was, again, slammed it on quick. The guy didn't realise that his wrist was in position for that to happen. I think with Rory, might as well go for him. But then the other thing about wrist locks is that typically they're easier to get from top positions, particularly side mount and things like that when you're looking for other stuff. It's very much a submission at the moment. However, lots of people get Rory MacDonald in their closed guard because he's smashing them like Paul Daly. And there is where a Calasan style wrist lock could really help. Unfortunately, I don't think he fights the hands much. He mainly goes for that can opener grip. So I don't know how much luck you're going to have looking for a wrist lock on him. Also, he's beastly strong and a world-class fighter. So yeah, the first person to be wrist locked in MMA, probably not going to be Rory MacDonald. But can you imagine if that's how he lost his title? That'd be so good. To MVP, that'd be fucking amazing. Oh. Cheers, Sam. Hi, Jack. Which strikers in MMA have most successfully blended elements of karate with Western boxing techniques? The old karate boxer. And what branches of forms of karate do you believe are the better striking basis for MMA? Sincerely, your boy Scott. I don't consider like Uechi, Goju, Wado, Shotokan, Kyokushin, Ashihara, Seido Keikan, all these fucking schools. I don't consider them styles of karate. Style in that sense is really just what forms you practice and the stylistic things you have on them, quirks. Styles of karate in terms of actual effectiveness, really there's only point fighting and knockdown fighting, and both of those teach different things. I think knockdown fighting teaches guys to be hard as nails, to value the body shots and attrition work and low kicks, and to throw up high kicks from very close range. It gives you real leg dexterity, where point fighting teaches you to really respect the opponent's ability and stay out of their range and really control the distance much better. Now, in terms of karate with boxing, I would say Kyokushin or knockdown style karate with boxing, look at the Dutch gyms. The Dutch kickboxing gyms were both, or the main ones were, is it Chikikara and, I can't remember, Majiro? He says I can't remember and then guesses anyway. But yeah, the two main ones were Kyokushin dojos, I believe, before they moved into kickboxing properly. Where when you're talking about when you're talking about karate and boxing and you're talking about point karate, I would say Kyoji Horiguchi, the burst into the 1-2 and then the weave afterwards and the left hook. That is karate weave into boxing perfectly. And the other great karate boxers I think about are Robert Whittaker and George St. Pierre. I think one who really didn't do that was Machida. His boxing never came up. He never learned the lessons of fighting in closer range, and so never developed any head movement, any guard, anything like that. So he would burst in, and if he caught him and hurt him, fantastic. Or if he dropped into a clinch, fantastic. But if he didn't, he'd then get hit with a counter, and then he started getting knocked out. Anyway, cheers, Scott. Right, I reckon that'll do us for today. Blacksplosive t-shirts are now on sale. I am putting them up on the website. I forgot to do that, but there's also a link in the description on YouTube. Buy the merch. We got Blacksplosive, we got Boxed Up by order of His Fistic Majesty, we got Juice to the Tits, and I'm going to put up just a plain slacky logo because I know some people don't like having Juice to the Tits written on their tits or other well, the designs I really like, but so I can understand how people want like a plainer one, just the Slacky logo. So we'll get that up too. All of them have the Slacky signature on there. If you want to keep up with the work I'm doing 3 articles this week. I'm doing 3 articles next week. We are in a fucking bumper phase of fights, and I am loving it. I'm feeling very. I don't want to say optimistic because I'm still me, but I'm feeling pretty good about it. So check thefightprimer.com for all my goings on. By Notorious, the life and fights of Conor McGregor, because he's having another fight soon, and I'll probably have to write about that too. And of course, if you want to support the podcast, which I couldn't do without your help, and get in on the Patreon episodes, make sure to join the Patreon. The Opium War first part went up in the week. People have been very positive on that. I didn't know, like, it was trying something new. It's been years since I used my history degree. Well, actually, I don't think I've used it since I got it, but it was good to go back and try some pure history because it's something I enjoy reading about still, and studying. And people were really positive about it. It's all about tea and drugs and sex. Well, no, not really sex, but tea and drugs and war. And the second part of that will be going up this weekend. I've got it all tidied up now. Well, I will have by the time you hear this. And hopefully it'll be as well received as the first. If you have an email to send to the Fights Gone By podcast, or you want to congratulate me on 100 episodes, fightsgonebypodcast@gmail.com. I'm your boy Jack Slack. It has been marvellous being with you for these 100 episodes. A lot of what I do is moaning, but I do love this, and I love this sport, and I love you. Bit of gay at the end there for you. Right, I will catch you next week. Enjoy those fucking fights. Conor bless.